This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 595, The Rise of the Female Masculist. Description. Over the past half year or so, the manosphere has witnessed the rise of the female masculist, that is, women who have absorbed MGTOW and masculist ideas and have carved out a niche for themselves in the internet, preaching MGTOW and masculist ideas to women. These ideas are not original, but they are coming from women, which is an encouraging sign, since women are more likely to be persuaded of the sense of the MGTOW and masculist arguments if they are coming from women than from men, given women's evolved self-group preference. This flyer proposes several reasons why we are now seeing the rise of the female masculists. There are now probably several million MGTOWs and masculists, so women are being influenced by that fact. Plus many monoconscious feminists are being dumped by their biconscious masculist boyfriends who cannot tolerate the monoconscious hypocrisy and bigotry of their former feminist girlfriends, so reject them. As more women become female masculists, it will be easier for masculists to have the gender laws men fared. Flyer itself. The Rise of the Female Masculist by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. You may have noticed over the past half year or so the growing number of female masculists who are preaching masculist and MGTOW ideas to women, pointing out ideas they take from the manosphere and pass them on to women. Since it's refreshing for the men in the manosphere to hear women say such things, even if they are not original, it's not surprising that links to these female masculists can be found on manosphere platforms for the manosphere to enjoy. To keep things concrete, I will provide links to 2 such female masculists so manospherians can check them out. The first is www.reddit, that's reddit.com, right directed arrow, just pearly things, so JUSTPEARLYTHINGS. This woman, who is level-headed, smart, thoughtful, is getting quite a following, especially amongst women. She has created a niche for herself on the internet, preaching masculist and MGTOW ideas to women, waking women up to the complaints that MGTOW and MGTOWs and masculists have been hurling at women for nearly a decade. Another is a bit younger woman, also very level-headed, pragmatic, married, who gives MGTOW-like advice to women, telling them that they have been lied to by feminists who preach that women should be as promiscuous as men, and then end up damaged goods, who are incapable of emotionally bonding with a man, since she has had so many penises in her that her current man is just another man, whom she can divorce easily, since his emotional on her is marginal at most. Her name is Rebecca Barrett, B-A-R-R-E-T-T, and her YouTube link is youtube.com/c/realfemsapien. That's REALFEMSAPIEN, Real Fem Sapien. So why, in my view, are we seeing more and more women take up the masculist and MGTOW viewpoints? I think there are several reasons for this growing phenomenon. One is just sheer numbers. There are probably more than 1 million MGTOWs around the world now who have been influenced by the MGTOW and masculist message that modern marriage for men is toxic, that paternity is toxic, because divorce is toxic for men. Since the divorce courts were taken over by the feminists in the 70s, who brought with them their unquestioned, unconscious assumptions of men's role as the cash machine that monoconscious feminism did not question. There are so many MGTOW and masculist type channels on the internet now that probably millions of young men have now been exposed to MGTOW and masculist ideas, who are now publicly rejecting marriage and paternity, telling their girlfriends that they refuse to marry, reject paternity, and that women have to become masculist in their gender politics, or they'll be treated as monoconscious feminazi vermin by masculisted men. Utterly rejected and have their face spat at for being MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, hated by masculists for their utter hypocrisy, preaching that gender oppression is a one-way street, the core idea of feminism, that men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed, whereas the masculists know better, preaching that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that in fact women oppress men worse than vice versa, since many of women's gender crimes against men last decades, which makes them a lot more serious than the relatively minor ways that men oppress women. To masculists, even rape, which is one of the major ways that men oppress women, is seen as rather small beer in comparison with the many decades-lasting gender crimes that women commit against men, the big three being women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, and women's forced fathering. Masculists have a hatred of monoconscious feminists who feel that they have the right to lash out at men for the ways that men oppress women, when masculists know that women oppress men far worse, and hence monoconscious feminists are seen by masculists as utter hypocrites who should be hated and are hated. Just as there are now probably several million MGTOWs, similarly there are probably proportionately hundreds of thousands of masculists, that is, the more radical, politically active, aggressive men's libbers who preach hatred of women who commit massive gender crimes against men, particularly the big three mentioned above, which are horrific gender crimes against men which should be hated and are hated, particularly by masculists. Masculists lash out at women who remain ignorant of how women oppress men, hurling abuse at these women for their monoconscious ignorance, their gender political bias, their callousness towards men and how women oppress men, and worse than vice versa. So another major reason why we are seeing more female masculists coming out of the woodwork lately is that more and more women who remain monoconscious are being rejected by their former monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, who recently have taken up the masculist message and converted themselves into biconscious masculists, who no longer tolerate the monoconscious misandrist bigotry of their monoconscious feminist girlfriends and dump them. As millions of monoconscious feminists get dumped by their newly biconscious ex-boyfriends, that dumping will motivate them to have second thoughts about their feminist monoconsciousness and start them thinking about what the masculists have to say about gender politics. As more and more monoconscious feminists are dumped, the higher are the odds that some of their female friends will also have been dumped for the same reasons, and the two of them will start comparing notes. Quote, "Oh, so your biconscious, now masculist ex-boyfriend dumped you too?" Question mark. Most women know that it's virtually impossible to be both a committed full-time careerist and stay at home with very small children, raising them at the same time. So they know that they have to catch some man who's prepared to help pay for them to have kids at home, while he's making most of the money during that time. These young women are listening to what the MGTOWs and masculists are saying about the toxicity of the divorce courts, taken over by the hated, fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders, and are learning that what the MGTOWs and masculists are saying about divorce and its toxicity for men makes sense. So they are forced to agree with MGTOWs and masculists, since these young women want to marry and be financially supported while their kids are very small. But the fluffy feminists have made divorce so shitty for men that 2/3 of young men in many countries now reject marriage and paternity as too toxic. So now millions of young women are panicking as they find with boyfriend after boyfriend that he refuses to give her his sperm, arguing that paternity and marriage really suck for men. So he's prepared only to lat with her, in brackets LAT equals living apart together. That is 2 abodes, 2 FIPs equals financially independent persons. So that when the relationship sours, the two of them just walk away to their own abodes, cost-free to the man. The core idea of masculism is that it is a rebellion by men against being a man's slave to a woman, working for her for decades of his life. Masculists are abolitionists who put powerful moral pressure on women to fip up, to bother to get career-competent educations at high school and college, so that these women can be fips as adults and not expect to manslave and divorce rape some stupid, gullible, manslavable man who remains ignorant of MGTOW and masculist ideas. A fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some gullible, manslavable man. But thanks to the MGTOW and masculist movements, the supply of such men is now seriously drying up as MGTOW and masculist ideas spread across the world, especially in Western countries that have near saturation of the spread of the internet. Most young men have now been exposed to MGTOW and masculist ideas who see marriage as toxic for men, to be avoided, since the price to men of divorce is way too high, so men, young men, vote with their feet. They will not be persuaded to be fathers again until the gender laws had been men-faired, and that will take a gender political revolution, with most men being masculisted, and women too, who learn to vote with men for the men-fairing of the gender laws, so that the many gender political discriminations against men, in brackets, e.g. in the divorce courts, women have the mara, men don't have the para. Women have feminist committees in the parliaments, men don't have masculist committees in the parliaments, etc. As more and more educated, university-type, biconscious feminists become well informed about masculist ideas, the zeitgeist will change, creating an expectation that the educated female who is into gender politics needs to be as well informed into masculist ideas as feminist ideas, and if she isn't, then she will be considered by both her female and male gender political colleagues as an ignorant, monoconscious bigot, and not be taken seriously. So, given the reasons above for why there are more female masculists, I think it's fair to say that the tide is turning. There are a growing number of reasons and forces why more and more women are becoming female masculists. They are being both pushed and pulled. They are pulled towards female masculism due to the very moral power of masculist arguments, and are being pushed towards female masculism due to their self-female interest, e.g. if they are to have babies again, they will have to vote with men for the men-fairing of the gender laws, or men, millions of masculisted men, will continue to reject them and spit in their faces for being monoconscious feminazi bigots and be left rotting on the shelf, hated and totally ignored, effectively exterminated. Probably a couple of years from the time of writing, that's December 2022, there will be enough female masculists for them to start having a political influence, so that when masculists start pushing for gender political changes in the laws, there will be enough female masculists who agree with the masculists that gender political legal reform in favour of the masculists of men will proceed more smoothly. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 590 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.